We were able to convert this former lab into a chapel. It's a wonderful spiritual place at the heart of the school. I'll often come up here maybe before school and see 2 or 3 students who are praying. The students have discrete RE lessons, which are very much focused around their Catholic faith, obviously. We're a school that is very focused on our faith, and we're receiving funding from the state.
In this country, about 1/3 of all of the schools are schools that are designated with a religious character, but 99% of those are schools that are either Church of England or Roman Catholic schools.
Most children in the United Kingdom go to state schools. In other words, they're funded by taxpayers. But there is this really strange anomaly in Britain that there are schools that are still funded by the taxpayer, but they're designated faith schools. And they are allowed, some of them, to select children according to their faith, and also to bar children if they're of the wrong faith or no faith.
Back in the early 1800s, the Church of England set out to deliver mass education to the poor of the country. So it went through a massive church school building programme, and then some years later, the state realised that this actually was a really important piece of work, and so the state joined in and became a partner with the church in the provision of education for the whole country.
As this country had a greater commitment to equality, there was a clamour from parents that we also, under equality principles, want a faith school so that our children can grow up in our faith environment. Then you had the first funded Jewish and Muslim schools. Now you've got Hindu and Sikh schools, and they are expanding. We're not a mosque, we're a school. We're here to educate children. What parents want to do at home about religious education beyond what we do is a matter for them, is not a matter for us.
So we're not running faith schools for Christians, we're running church schools for everybody.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
All state-funded schools must take any pupil that wants to go there if they have room to do so. When schools have more applicants than have places, there needs to be a mechanism for deciding which pupils get in and which don't. In church schools, it's permitted to give priority to those who are members of the faith that established the school.
Now, they will restrict entry to pupils based on religion. That is despite the fact that all the teachers, all the cooks, all the cleaners, the entire staff are paid for by all members of the public.
It would be inconceivable to have swimming pools just for Jews or hospitals just for Christians. It's just not possible, it's illegal. The only reason why you can divide children by faith in schools is there's an exemption in the Equality Act for schools. And that speaks volumes, the fact that we have to have an exemption from equality.
If a school is achieving well, parents don't really care what faith they are or what faith the school is. The primary purpose of most parents, are to be in an environment to get good results. And a lot of faith schools do well.
Property prices escalate around schools that are really popular and perceived to be doing really well, and that squeezes out of the market anybody who can't afford to live there. So what we introduce into the system is the ability for parents to be able to choose their school on the basis not of what size house they can afford or what kind of house they can afford, but on the ethos of the school. You've got to make a choice about how to get that best balance of intake. The fairest way that we can come up with measuring that is church attendance, because that gives an indication of whether someone really is committed to that Christian ethos underpinning the school.
The pupils have a practice form which they take to their parish priest, and the priest has to tick it off to say that these students are attending Mass regularly over the last 2 years.
And we have to actually sign off a letter to say that someone's been attending church. We have to tick boxes, and of course we do it because they did attend church, so we can't say they didn't, and also because you know, on an individual level we want to help parents.
We don't try and make any judgment about how good a Catholic somebody is, about what they're doing within their local parish. It is simply, are they practicing their faith regularly?
I've got particular bitter experience of this because when I lived in a London borough called Merton, immediately opposite the house where we live was a state primary school. And I wanted both my 2 children, my son and my daughter, to go there. It was their local school, their friends would be going there. However, that was an Anglican school, and half the places there were allocated to the children of parents who were or pretended to be Anglicans.
is actually an option that everybody's got to walk to their nearest church, to be able to go in free of charge, and to be able to get a sense of whether this rounded education delivered within that Christian narrative is something that they really want for their child.
Me and my wife spent, it's probably about 3 years going to church most Sundays. I'm an atheist. My wife describes herself as an agnostic. I went to church despite the fact I'm an atheist, under duress. I didn't do it because it was fun, but I did it because that was the only way to get my children into their local state school.
In fact, the number of baptisms for children newborn, say up to 1 year old, have gone down quite considerably in the last decade, but baptism of children aged about 4 has suddenly shot up. Why? Well, because that's the age at which their parents were applying for the local school, and it helps the child, or it may help the child get in if they can show they're being baptised.
Because this church was a feeder school for a primary school, i.e. the starting age is when the children are 5, there were lots of children there who were aged sort of 3, 4 and 5, with their parents of course. But beyond that, the number of children, they just seemed to vanish. You'd struggle to find any children who were, say, 8, 9 or 10, because they didn't need to go to church anymore.
I know that vicars and rabbis are not very happy that people suddenly come in the run-up to the admissions period, and we know they're cheating, and we know it's hypocritical and insincere, and it doesn't please us because we know they're going to disappear the moment the child's in school.
Each Sunday, there's only about 1 million people who go to some sort of Anglican service in a country of 60-odd million. That's not a national religion. And even if it was a national religion, the point is these schools are paid for by all taxpayers. They should be open to all taxpayers.
A charge is made against faith-based schools that they cause division or are very exclusive. Our aim is to be inclusive, to look outwards, to respect other faiths and other viewpoints. Faith-based schools give far more back to the state than they take in terms of funding.
If you look at the history of the Catholic schools in this country, what we've been doing from the very beginning is actually taking a diverse group of people who come from a really wide range of backgrounds, particularly a lot of the new immigrant communities. In the 19th century, it was primarily the Irish. We're still doing the same thing with a very large range of ethnic communities that are coming to our schools and being integrated into mainstream society.
There's things I passionately believe in. I passionately follow a particular football team. I don't expect the government to fund schools for me and exclude children of parents who support different football teams. Why should religion be part of state education?
Faith schools are delivering in terms of academic progress of students, but as a faith-based school we would say that of course it's much wider than that and much more significant than that in looking at the whole person and in looking the values that we're instilling which will be positive for society.
In fact, although I'm a rabbi and I value my own faith, I deliberately sent my children to the local community school, not to the local Jewish day school, because I wanted them to sit next to a Christian and play football in a break with a Muslim and do homework with a Hindu and walk home with an atheist, because I felt that they would have a better education as a result, my children that is, whilst the other children would get to know my children in Jewish life, and also produce a more coherent and cohesive society.